Next up at UFC Vegas 44, we have a sort of last-minute late replacement, Jared Vanderaa versus Azamat Murzakanov. Azamat Murzakanov 10-0, 5-0 in his last 5, making his official UFC debut. Jared Vanderaa 12-6 overall, 3-2 in his last 5, coming off of that beating that he took, where he was just on the wrong side of that fight, and that is what it is. Azamat Murzakanov is not the biggest heavyweight in the division, but he makes up for his physical stature with legit power. He is fast. He is heavy-handed. He is a good wrestler with solid ground and pound, but his hands are so good that he does not go to his wrestling very often. Jared Vanderaa built his career on his grappling until his fight with Justin Tafa, where he turned into a volume striker. And now that he's a striker, he's got a long jab, solid distance control, clean striking overall, in addition to his size, and he still has that wrestling. People keep forgetting that he has that wrestling background because they've just seen his UFC fights, didn't do any research before his UFC fights, and I guess he's a striker. Well, the reality is he hasn't showcased his wrestling in the UFC because he's been matched up against 2 wrestling beasts so far. The dude's had 4 fights under the UFC banner. 2 of them were against savage wrestlers, and the other 2 that weren't, he beat the hell out of them. So he's 1 for 1 on his takedown attempts in the UFC, so he hasn't attempted that many. But honestly, this is a hard pick. These odds are baffling to me. If Jared was a career-long striker, I would put more stock into the fact that he has a 9-inch reach advantage in this fight, but he doesn't use his length well enough for that to be a major factor. It is a factor, but it's not as big of a deal as everybody else is making it to be. He has volume. He can stay on the outside, go back to his roots and wrestle. The issue is that Azamat will be live for a knockout at any moment, and he also has good wrestling if he decides to use it. I do like Jared here. He is my pick, but I am super nervous. The only place my money is going on this fight is I'm doing over the 1.5 round line. And you could bet the money line for plus 180 on Jared, or for plus 140, you can get the over on the round line. So I like over 1.5 rounds, plus 140. And I'll take that instead of a money line on Jared because he could potentially get knocked out. But 1.5 rounds, I see it cruising past that, no problem. What do you think, Jakey?
Yeah, quick question. In regards to Jared, are you being serious?
Yeah, I'm serious. The dude is a giant. He has wrestling. He's got the striking. All he has to do is avoid the big power speed punches from Azamat. But again, I'm not confident enough to put my money on Jared, but I am confident enough to put my money on over 1.5 rounds.
Yeah, I put my money on Azamat, and I actually got him at minus 172. And in my mind, he should be a 3 or 4-1 favorite. In my notes, I just have, can Jared survive? That's the only way I see this fight going. Can he survive? Azamat, first of all, let me get to Azamat for a second, because his very first fight, his very first professional fight, he got a first-round knockout in 10 seconds and didn't fight again for 5 years. That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my life. If I got a 10-second knockout, I would be fighting the very next week thinking I could knock. He didn't fight for 5 more years and then got a 20-second knockout in his second fight. So the guy's got power. And you mentioned he's got wrestling, but he doesn't really use it. In my notes, I have he dumps you to kill you, meaning if you're hurt, you're up against the fence, he will dump your legs and he will TKO you on the ground. He doesn't really go to it offensively to win rounds or anything like that. He'll just kind of use his striking, and if you guys has you hurt, then he'll dump you, then he'll get on top of you and actually absolutely TKO you. I will note too, his nickname is the Professional, and he is like the most stand-up guy in the world. There was one fight where a guy he checked the guy's kick, and you could tell the guy was like limping, like I don't know if he broke his foot or whatever. Instead of jumping on him, Azamat looked at him and was like, "You still want to go?" And the guy was like, "Yeah, let's go ahead and keep fighting." He goes, "Okay," and then just like a lead uppercut knocked him out. So he is a professional in there. Listen, Jared, you mentioned the wrestling against Romanov. He was taken down 5 of 7 times, absolutely controlled. I think the path to victory for Azamat is anywhere he wants it, right? He's going to win the striking if he wants to win the striking. If he wants to wrestle, I think he's probably going to out wrestle Jared. Maybe Jared can sneak in, get that offensive wrestling going, and Azamat off his back. You never really know what happens there. Maybe, all these first round finishes. He doesn't look like a guy that would gas, but he's never really been in those deep waters. So if Jared can bring him there, I could see where you can come through on your bet, or your, I guess not your bet, but your pick here with Jared. But I just think Azamat absolutely dominates this fight. Getting him at 172 was an absolute steal. I love that bet. I'm not usually a guy that bets on favorites, and I just love that 172. So
you got minus 172.
Minus 172. So I think these odds are going to keep pushing closer to 3-1. I like Azamat all the way.
Yeah, I mean, everything you're saying is accurate. I like Jared. Just there's a lot of random factors here, but again, my money picks don't really matter, right? Your money matters, but my money is over 1.5 rounds. And you mentioned the Romanov fight. Romanov, a massive tank of a wrestler who has power in his hands, not a great striker, but massive tank of a wrestler. I bet the over 1.5 on that, and I hammered that too. They blew past 1.5 rounds. That actually went quite a while before Jared had enough. But Jared's big, tough, and in this fight, he'll be massive. So I do like
a bigger guy. I actually think that favors Azamat, because Azamat is a striker. You mentioned, I think he was a light heavyweight that's now fighting at heavyweight, but he is bouncy, on his toes, in and out. And I think Jared's going to have a real issue with that speed. So we'll see what happens.
He could. I'm still good with over 1.5. Jared's a tough guy. And he's been in there. The poor guy's had a pretty hard go at it, especially for a heavyweight in the UFC. But, I like the 1.5, the over there. That's a confident bet, at least for this fight, with some plus money. You get plus 140 on that. So I'm not going to mess with plus 180 on Jared when I can just worry about the rounds. wewantpicks.com/bets. 5 different partners. I got the plus 140 at my bookie. wewantpicks.com/bets. Click on my bookie, make a deposit. Let me know. I will send you $50. Cash App, PayPal, Venmo, however you want it. We do not have DraftKings prices or Monkey Knife Fight lines yet, because this fight is honestly brand new. I think yesterday they announced it, maybe Sunday night. So
I kind of wish they already assigned him DraftKings based on the previous odds, because it feels like these odds are going to keep growing apart. And he's going to end up being like $9,400, but we'll see what happens.
It's funny because Jared's replacing Felipe Lins, and he actually came right in. The odds basically stayed the same. So it was a like for like kind of swap. But yeah, I imagine even though it's a 2-1 favorite, they're going to price Azamat like $9,600 or something absurd. I guarantee they will. And in that case, maybe I'll explore Jared and DraftKings, but we'll see what happens.